I have decided to share my story with you. This took place in March or April of 2009. I just started working at Walmart in the hardware department. As a female, I knew little about hardware, but they didn't seem to care. I spent most of my time stocking, pointing customers to the right aisle, or mixing paint. I rarely knew anything when it came to answering handyman work. Also note, I was about 23 at the time. I'm 5 foot, and at the time, weighed about 110 pounds. It started the first Saturday I ever worked there. I had the early morning shift, starting at 7 a.m. It was pretty quiet and sleepy, and I had 0 customers for a good hour straight. I was also working with another coworker named Ron, who had started the same day as me. A man came in looking for a few different items. He was an Indian man, said he was from India at least, who was either in his late 30s or early 40s. He hovered over me, maybe around 6'3" or so. A decently buff guy, also wearing a spring jacket with its collar turned up and a baseball hat. He completely bypassed Ron and went straight to me for help. I showed him to the products he was requesting when the questions started. I answered politely with the standard, "I'm not qualified to answer that. I can ask my coworker if he has any thoughts or ideas." He wouldn't let me, however. Instead, he dragged me to the furthest aisle in our department, far away from Ron. He started spouting off random stuff that he was trying to do around his house, asking me what I thought might work best for his needs. I really had no idea, so I just pointed out random things because he didn't seem interested in having decent help. While I was talking, with my back to him looking at different products, that's when I felt him creep up behind me and grab my ass. In my mind, I tried to play it off as an accident, until he did it 2 more times, as well as brushed my chest at least 3 times. I kept inching away as best as I could, while trying to do my customer service thing. I was finally saved when Ron came up and asked if we could switch customers because he had a customer who needed paint mixed. He wasn't taught how to do that yet. The man left about 2 seconds after that. I told Ron what had happened and he agreed to keep an eye out for him. If he were to come back, Ron would help him out. But we didn't see him again that day. I worked the same shift the next day, but this time alone. The man came back. I spent about an hour trying to dodge his hands. At one point, I was bending down to pick something up, and he snuck up in front of me. He had a boner going. I was obviously trying to not look at it, nor would I admit that I did, but he must have known I saw since his crotch was right in my face. "Do you like what you see?" he asked. I have to get something from the stockroom," and I darted off. I took that time to talk to a manager about this man. I was clearly upset by him, and I figured the store had to value their employees somewhat. I must have talked to the wrong manager. I talked to my area's manager, Christina, and she basically told me to suck it up and deal with it. "Customer satisfaction is our #1 goal," she said. I realized I had to satisfy them that way. I never saw him on the weekdays, but once Saturday rolled around, here he was again. I was with my supervisor, Matt, that day, but he had a meeting in the morning to attend, so I was basically alone in the department. The man dragged me to the tool aisle because he wanted a new hammer and nails so he could build a birdhouse. The grabbing and brushing started up again, and I must have looked clearly uncomfortable. Another male customer came up and asked me if everything was okay. My creeper darted out of the store pretty quick. The other customer, who introduced himself as David, asked me what was happening. I wasn't comfortable telling him my story because I didn't know him, but he asked me if the creeper was harassing me during store hours, and I just gave a slight nod. David walked off, but about 10 minutes later he was back, trailed by 2 other people. My co-manager Eric, and the head of AP, LP and other stores, Bobby. David explained to the 2 what he witnessed, how wrong it was for Walmart to let this happen, and demanded they rectify the situation before I was hurt. Eric thanked David, and him and Bobby pulled me into the office. Eric did all the talking. "Is this true?" "Yes." "How long has this been going on?" "Well, he started last Saturday and came back Sunday. I didn't see him again until today." "Why didn't you tell anyone before?" "Why did a customer bring it to management's attention?" "I tried. I told Christina and she told me to get over it and help the guy no matter what." Neither of them looked happy at that. "Could you point him out on the security footage?" "Sure." So I went in the AP room with them. We rewinded the tapes and I pointed him out from that day. The only problem was with the baseball cap and collar-up jacket. You couldn't see his face, and he purposely kept his head down to avoid being seen on the cameras. I described what he looked like to them, and Bobby said he would warn all of his AP peeps. I worked the next day again, Sunday. Our department kept getting phone calls, but every time somebody answered, the caller would hang up. When I finally answered, it was the creep. "Oh, good, you are there. I'm on the way. I'm taking you out to lunch. No ifs, ands, or buts about it, you sexy girl," he said. I let out an eek and hung up the phone on him. However, I did call Eric and Bobby and let them know what he said. Both of them showed up in street clothes as well as another AP guy. They stationed themselves in each of the aisles and let me know the police were already called and on their way. About 5 minutes later, the creep showed up. He literally ripped me away from another lady I was helping at the moment and tried dragging me to the exit in the tire center. Eric and Bobby tackled him to the ground and the police were there about a minute later. He was arrested and banned from the store. From what I was told, he had outstayed his visa or something and was being deported back to India. Never saw him again and my nightmare was over. I studied abroad in Peru when I was 19. This was 6 years ago, so the story is a little bit foggy. A lot of the time, I was the only white person around, so I stuck out. I would often get whistles and catcalls, but I think this guy was up to something more malicious. I was on a bus to one of the other neighborhoods, a route I had taken maybe only once or twice by myself at that point. A man who looked to be in his 60s got on the bus, scanned the seats, then headed straight to the seat beside me. He was also white and was wearing a baseball hat and a t-shirt. He sat down and asked in English if I was American. I said yes and asked him where he was from. I actually didn't care and didn't really want to talk to him, but I used to be polite. Anyways, he said he was from Lima, but he liked to learn languages. At some point, he asked where I was going and I told him the neighborhood, but not the exact stop. He told me that he could read palms, so I said great and flipped mine up. He also said he didn't do readings for free, and then he told me I could trade him English lessons for palm readings. I wanted all interaction with this guy to end ASAP, so there was no way that I was going to give him lessons. I just told him that he was already good enough at English then. He grabbed one of my wrists and flipped my palm up and told me it was very interesting and that I really needed to know, but he would only tell me for English lessons. He asked for my phone number, so I lied and told him that I didn't have a phone number in Peru yet, but he could give me his and I'd call him when I get one. He didn't like that idea. He really wanted to be able to contact me himself. He hesitantly pulled out a piece of paper and wrote his number down. He also wrote his name as a word in Peru that is often used to refer to a person from the mountains and is sometimes derogatory. And besides, this guy definitely was not that. He was a white guy from the city. Well, he told me that I could just call him that, brushing it off and saying that I didn't need to know his name. I was very freaked out but didn't want to cause a scene. He told me that he was concerned I was lying and wouldn't call him, and he said that it had happened before when he asked a woman from India to give him lessons, and it didn't work out. He said he would hate for what happened to her to happen to me. What the heck? At this point my skin was crawling. I was panicking, but I still didn't want to draw attention to myself. I realized that nobody else on the bus knew what was going on because we had been speaking in English the whole time. With as much sincerity that I could muster, I told him I would call him. He told me he didn't believe me because I wasn't looking at him. Then he grabbed my face and turned my head toward him. He had his hand wrapped around my jaw and was holding on firmly. I said I would call him and he let go. We weren't close to my stop, but I told him I had to go. I started to stand up, but he pushed my legs back down and told me we weren't there yet, so I sat down and was scared he would try to follow me or wouldn't let me off. He kept his arm over my legs to stop me from standing up. As soon as we were in the neighborhood, I got off the bus. He didn't follow me, thankfully. So that's my unsatisfying end of the story. That was the last time I saw or heard from him. I threw away the paper with his number, thinking that I didn't want it and didn't need it. I wish I had given the information to the police. I don't know what his plans were, and I don't know anything about the Indian woman. My name is Gabrielle, and this is my creepy encounter. When I was 15, my dad got a job in England. I'm of Scandinavian origin and moved the family to London. 2 years later, his job there was done and he was ready to move back home. And he did, carelessly leaving me behind since I was 17 and considered old enough to fend for myself. Also, I was a pretty horrible teen, so that might have played a part, but still. I got dumped while my little sisters returned home again. It wasn't all bad because I got to move in with a classmate and her family, a large Catholic family who saw it as their goal to get me back on the right track. Usually, their strategy included family dinner every night and asking me if I needed help with my schoolwork, if I needed anything knitted, and so on. I played the part of the polite, dutiful surrogate daughter well, and I liked my life there very much. But I also enjoyed London nightlife. I never did drugs or anything, but I liked the thrill of being an unsupervised teen in London at night. Being too young to get into most places, I decided to get myself a fake ID. I had no idea how people acquired such things, but was pointed to a guy called Terrible Freddy. That alone should have given me a clue. Terrible Freddy was a tall, skinny guy who lingered around the clubs at night. "Sure, I can help you," he said. "Give me your passport, 3 days in the cash, and you'll get an ID that can fool anyone," he promised. Ignoring my softly humming inner alarm bell, I handed him my passport. "Ah, a Norwegian little lady, are you? Lovely. What brings you here?" "My family did, but then they left me when they went back home," I said, trying to sound like it was a really cool situation to be in. "Don't lose the passport. It's the only actual ID I got," I added, not entirely comfortable about letting it go. Terrible Freddy seemed intrigued by this information. I could feel him stare at me as I walked away. 3 days later, I went to Camden Market to get my new ID. I spotted Freddy hanging around with some big bloke in a leather jacket and another smaller but psycho-looking dude. The sight of them together made me uneasy, and later I could understand that it was because Freddy was always seen on his own. Bringing his posse was a new thing, and they all looked like they were on a mission more remarkable than handing a fake ID to a teenage girl in exchange for some cash. I walked in a large circle around the market, considering my options. He had my passport and possibly my ID, my ticket to the clubs. But the sight of the three men had caused an almost nauseous kind of fear in me. I couldn't bring myself to walk over to them. That's when he saw me. Gabrielle, he shouted, waving and smiling at me to come over. I started walking towards them and saw the other two men, who he had been talking with just moments ago, now pretended not to know him. One taking an exaggerated interest in the fruit of the sale, the other watching intently from a distance, but his sheer size made it impossible for him not to be noticed. "I got your papers in the car. It's over here. Walk with me, Gabs," he said, and reached out to take my hand, and, in an act of pretend chivalry, completely out of character for him, he kissed my hand and then proceeded to walk arm in arm with me, away from the crowded marketplace. He had a pretty firm grip on my arm, and as I attempted to free myself, saying something about not being a damsel in distress, he locked my arm in an iron grip and started walking faster. All while joking and talking, his voice friendly and cheerful. His words kind and pleasant, but his body language and forcefulness scared me. One of the last things my dad said before waving goodbye to me a few months earlier was, "Enjoy London life, but be smart. If something seems off, it's probably because it is." The sound of tires screeching and the sight of a car driven by the man in a leather jacket were the last hint I needed to make my move. "Let go of me," I shouted at the top of my lungs, determined to attract attention at any cost. This only led to the car stopping and the huge bloke suddenly appearing as if he had been waiting somewhere close by. "Grab her," Terrible Freddy said, and the large guy reached out to grab hold of me as the car came to a halt in front of us. I threw myself on the ground, kicking and screaming and causing the absolute most noise and chaos I could. It didn't make the three men run away, but it did attract the immediate attention of a homeless guy who shouted, "Police, police," so loudly it must have been heard all over the place. More people started to move in our direction, and that's when the trio decided it wasn't worth the risk and got in the car and sped off. The icy blue goat-like eyes of Terrible Freddy stared at me as they left. The homeless guy Cody stayed with me until police actually arrived, but what could I report? That my attempt to buy a fake ID had misfired, and that I was almost kidnapped for who knows what intentions? That my passport was now in the hands of possible traffickers? Yeah, I should have reported all of that, but 17-year-old me was too scared to do it. I stayed in London until the end of that school year, then made my way back home. Not home to my family home, but home to Norway. Never told anybody what happened, so it's nice to finally get this off my mind now. Over 10 years ago, I used to live on a peninsula in Norway. It was quite idyllic, actually, as I, my sister, and my mom lived within walking distance of a beach. We had a short and incredibly narrow driveway that led to the house, and the only window in the house facing the driveway was my bedroom window, which was important. I was about 9 or 10 at the time when the incident happened. I was in the living room watching a show on Jetix. I think it was around 6 or 7 p.m., as it got dark pretty fast at that time of the year in January. I had been sitting there for hours when my mom told me to go to my bedroom and watch TV as we were having guests soon. I grabbed my things and went inside my room. I remember the room felt really cold, so I turned on the heater and went back out to the living room to get my candy or something like that. On my way out the door, a sudden feeling of dread washed over me, and I had this feeling that somebody had been watching me. I don't know how to explain this feeling, but it was as if I subconsciously could see somebody outside my window from the corner of my eye, but not realize it until I grabbed the door handle. I turned around quickly and glanced out the window. Nothing. I felt really stupid and brushed it off as me just being paranoid or dramatic. I got my candy and went back into my room. The first thing I noticed was that my bedroom window had been slightly opened, and I didn't remember opening it. I figured maybe my mom did. Suddenly, I heard a sort of scratching sound outside my window, and this time I froze still. I couldn't process what was going on. There was a person outside my window. His face was glued to the glass, and he was holding his hands on each side to get a better look inside my room. As my window was quite far up when standing outside, I could only see his head. For a brief second, I thought maybe he was one of the guests Mom was talking about, but I had never seen him in my entire life. He was just staring at me. Couldn't move, or maybe I could, but I didn't want to. I was too scared. He looked like he was in his 40s, and I remember him having really dark circles under his eyes. He just stood there for what felt like an eternity, and then suddenly widened his eyes and continued to stare. This scared the crap out of me, and I managed to shout, "Mom." The man panicked and disappeared quickly. As I was in the middle of telling my mom that this man was standing outside my window, our doorbell rang. My mom answered the door and wouldn't let me out in the hallway to see who it was. I just remember her looking uneasy when she came back. A few months later, the same man was arrested and charged with murder after his neighbors complained about a horrific smell coming from his apartment. The police discovered the decomposing body of a 13-year-old girl in the attic, who had been murdered by him. She was last seen in her bedroom and had been missing for several days. After all of these years, my mom finally told me what the man said at the door. He told her that somebody had ordered takeout and he wanted to check if it was the right address. This being a small peninsula, she recognized him from a small vegetable shop and realized he was lying. She got scared and quickly told him that nobody had ordered anything. A year later, we moved to the city, and only now do I fully understand why. I truly believed that if my mom had not been there, I would not be alive today. Sometimes I feel guilty for the girl's death and wonder if she would be alive and well today if I had been taken instead. I currently go to a large university in Philadelphia, and my school isn't in the greatest part of the city. I'm a senior now, and I've sort of learned to just keep my head down, and most people in the area will leave me alone. The one exception that I've had to this was my freshman year. My roommate freshman year was an absolute madwoman, stealing my stuff, threatening to physically assault me, and spreading rumors about me. I generally tried to stay out of my room for the most part to just avoid any interaction with her until I was able to get a new roommate the next semester. As a result, I spent a lot of my time at the library or at other friends' places. A few weeks into my first semester, I think it was around early October, I was hanging out at a friend's place. He lived on the other side of campus, probably a 15-minute walk from my dorm room, but my path from my room to his dorm never left campus. I had been warned prior to moving into my dorm room that campus was the safest place for students because the locals generally stayed off campus unless they were grabbing food from a food truck. Keeping that in mind, I really didn't mind walking back from my friend's dorm room late at night since the path was well lit and the only people I saw were other students. Regardless, it was getting late and it was a weeknight, so I told my friend that I was going to head out. He offered to walk me home, but I declined, saying I would be fine, which was my first mistake. The walk back was perfectly fine up until I got to the block that my dorm building was on. For context, there was another empty dorm building on the block that I lived on. It was scheduled to be torn down later that year because there was black mold everywhere inside. but at the time it was still standing and there were absolutely no lights outside of it. There was a courtyard behind the building which I used as a shortcut, which was my second mistake. As I entered the courtyard, I used my phone as a flashlight to kind of guide my way through the space. As I was nearing the other end of it, I heard somebody called out, "Miss." Obviously, my first thought was nope, and I just kept walking, pretending I didn't hear anything and picked up my pace. But the voice called again, "Wait, miss." At this point, I was nearly out of the courtyard, and there was some light coming from the windows of my dorm building, so I could kind of see what was going on without completely relying on my flashlight. I turned around to see who had been calling out to me, which was my third mistake, and I was met with a man. He looked so ordinary, except for his oddly wide smile and the fact that he was carrying a rather heavy-looking trash bag. "Hey, miss, excuse me. I have something for you." Nah, I think I'm okay. I need to be getting home," I said. "Nah, I think you need this. Let me show you it." He opened the trash bag and reached his hand in. I didn't know what to expect at all, so I bolted. I ran further from the courtyard and toward the ramp that led up to my building, thinking I could outrun him, but I was sorely mistaken. Despite the fact that there was about 10 to 15 feet between us, as soon as I turned, his hand was around my wrist. "Miss, I have something for you. I really think you're going to need it." Feeling trapped and unsure what to do, I sighed, defeated. I hoped that somebody would look out of their window and see what was going on, or somebody else would be walking back to the building at a late hour and see us. I wanted to scream, but I was scared that if I drew attention to us, he would do something that would make me really regret trying to get help. Again, not the greatest part of the city. He smiled at me like he knew I wasn't going to try and call out and let go of my wrist. I didn't realize how tightly he was gripping me until he released it. He took a step back from me and reached back into the trash bag again. My heart was pounding and I wasn't sure what to expect, but it definitely wasn't what he pulled out of the bag. It was a clock. An old digital alarm clock. The thing had to be at least 20 years old, and it was encrusted with dirt, like he pulled it out of a junkyard. I was stunned at the sight of the yellow and orange plastic. After I realized that he was actually trying to give me the clock, I thought it might have been a bomb. "Here, this is just for you." I really don't need one," I said. "I have a clock in my room," gesturing toward the massive building behind me. "Well, this one's different." What the heck, I'm thinking. What is that even supposed to mean? Miss, see, this one has a radio. Pretty unique, don't you think? I bet yours doesn't have a radio function," he said, smiling. I mean, mine didn't, but don't most alarm clocks have radios built into them? I took a step back from him, and as I stepped back, he stepped closer, mirroring my movement. He reached out, presenting the clock to me. I took another step back. He also took another one forward. I knew my back was literally going to be against the wall of the dorm building if I took another 2 steps back, and I wasn't sure where to go. I felt like I had no choice but to go against everything my body was telling me not to do and accept the clock. I reached out and noticed that where he grabbed my arm was already bruising. With my hand now outstretched, he placed the clock in my hand. I felt so dirty having it in my hand. I don't know how to describe that, but I had instantly felt like I had just finished rolling around in the dirt. My arm felt like it was throbbing, and the clock was so heavy. It felt like it was getting heavier with every passing second. I knew it just felt like that because I was freaking out, but it didn't make the experience any less terrifying. I didn't know what to do. The guy was still smiling at me. I blurted out, "Thanks," and spun around, gripping the clock. I took a step away from him toward the ramp leading up to my building, and he took a step back. I decided that this was my chance to bolt for the door. I spun around on my heels and took another few steps before hearing, "You're so beautiful. I love you," called out behind me. I turned back. The man was out of sight. I screamed. I didn't know what I just got myself into, but I didn't want to be any part of it. I sprinted toward the door to the building, dumping the clock in the trash can outside on the way. I still thought there was a decent chance that it was a bomb, and if it was going to explode, I wanted it to do so in a contained space. Nothing came of the man or the clock other than the bruise on my arm. It healed completely within a few days, and soon after that, I sort of forgotten about the incident. I think I just repressed the memories and didn't want to unpack what I went through. I still try to not think about it, and the only reason I'm writing this now is because one of my current not crazy roommates had brought it up a few days ago, and the floodgates of my brain opened, and I felt like I needed to share what happened.